Hello there. My name's Mark. The Canardian. Charlie's throwing gang signs already.
That's what I do. That's my scene.
You were away last week. I forgot about the gang signs, and now you're back.
I'm just glad to be back. It's solid. Yeah, we were out. My wife and I went and saw America. No, we went out to Las Vegas for Star Trek Las Vegas, which actually, if you listen to the Code 47 feed, my wife April and I did record a special about talking about our experience here, kind of compare contrast with the Star Trek cruise. Regardless, we had fun. You know, we saw a lot of America doing it. You know, visited some national parks and all this kind of good stuff. So,
awesome.
But yeah, regardless, it's good to be back. Good to be talking about Star Wars. I mean, because again, even though I've rotated my desk, and right now you're looking at, it's a rare occasion that I get to show my figures, because you'll see the glass block window in the upper right hand corner if you're watching us on YouTube usually has sun pouring through it, so I don't get to showcase my figures. But here you see my Indiana Jones stuff, the Star Trek, kind of the Marvel villains, and then my Cosmic Marvel, and then my beloved Mark and I were talking in the pre-roll about how much we love Captain America the Winter Soldier, which was my OG original favorite MCU film. But I digress.
Absolutely one of, if not my absolute top, like, standalone, like you said, not like Endgame or whatever, you know, competing with that, but as far as that's kind of standalone, and even, you know, so much just emotional weight to it, and just
totally
so much to it. Anyway, I got off track very quickly there. This is episode 69 of the Holocron Chronicles podcast, and you may have noticed, because we've been chatting for a couple minutes already and no one else is chatting, or if you're watching on YouTube, it's very evident, there is no guest this week. It's just Charlie and I, and we have some stuff cooking with Shadows of the Empire and some older stuff that we're going to be talking about coming up, because we don't want to talk about new stuff. We don't want to talk about new shows and everything with the writer strike and the actor strike going on right now. We basically just, we feel like we want to just let that happen, support that in the small ways that we can. We've made a donation to the Actors Fund through Secret Friends Unite. And we, we're going to try to pivot the show. So we were going to cover Ahsoka. We're no longer really planning on doing that unless some things change. So I think the next one we have lined up, Charlie, is the Shadows of the Empire episode.
Yes.
We've got to do some research, because it's been like 20 years. I was 12 when that came out.
Over 25 years, and it was kind of my idea. We're gonna take impressions. Again, that summer of 1996 when that came out, I was 20. I was in college. Todd, who was our other secret friend, Major Domo, and John, who was our other founding secret friend. We were all roommates at the time, and kind of experienced, to tee it up, the phenomenon that was a everything but the film of a Star Wars experience. So you had a comic series, you had a soundtrack, you had a video game, you had a novel, which was obviously the primary driving force, and you also had a signature toy line. So we're going to talk all about that in our next episode. We're gonna do some research, break it down, and hopefully inspire you to go back and check this out and relive the summer of 1996, because it was kind of a special time. It was before the special editions. It was clearly after the last death rattle of Star Wars on TV at the time, which was Caravan of Courage and the Ewok Adventures and Droids the cartoon series, and it was the last non-film event before we got the special editions that then segued into the prequels, and then kind of where we are now. So yeah, look for that in our next episode. I'm kind of excited, and whether it's just you and I talking about it, I think we might bring Todd in. I've been trying to entice John to join us, but he's a little reluctant, says he doesn't remember anything. But I'm a salesman. I'm going to keep working on him. So John, we'll see. But
none of us remember anything. I was 12. It's 20 something years ago. Like I didn't know until fairly recently that all the other stuff existed. I knew of the Nintendo 64 game because it was one
Right,
of
sure.
2 Nintendo 64 games, and my parents knew I liked Star Wars. We got a Nintendo
Here
64.
you go.
It was like Mario Kart and that game. And I remember
Right.
playing the hell out of that. And then I think I had like 1, maybe 2 figures from the figure line, but it was just because I collected those re-released Star
It
Wars
was just
figures, like the smaller ones. And
ancillary.
I
Yeah.
think I had
Yeah, because
Prince Shizu.
the Power of the Force line came out in 1995. It was a ridiculous line. You got very anthropomorphized versions of Luke, Leia, Han. Everybody was way too muscular. It was just,
Super
and then
buff.
they moved it on to this line. But again, teasing
Mhm.
up obviously what we're going to talk about next time, because it's
Exactly.
the 90s for Star Wars was very weird. But anyway.
So yeah, lots of research going into that one. We may even break it up into 2 episodes or something like that if we want to cover like video game and this and that, whatever. So we have some planning to do. So we figured, in the meantime, it's been a little while. I think I'm assuming we have some new listeners. It's been a while since we really introduced ourselves. I mean, we comment every once in a while. There'll be questions that we ask our guests. I think the how would you die in the Star Wars universe? We've answered that ourselves a couple of times.
Right.
But some of this other stuff people may not know, and we were coming up with this. And my wife actually was the one that kind of said, well, and I was trying to think like, what can Charlie and I do if we don't find a guest, and if we don't have like a big topic? And she said, like, why don't you just talk about yourselves? Have you ever done that? I was like, maybe like
probably when we
60 some
started
episodes ago. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's been, my God, we started this show in the end of 2020, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, every 2 weeks we're at 69 episodes, so that's
I mean, it's not long
it's been a
after
while.
I started Code, but anyway, before we get that, let me jump in and talk about our fantastic Patreons. These are the people who support us on various levels. They give us the opportunity to do some additional content. I'm very privileged to be able to do my Facts of Geek Life show, where myself and a guest talk about a classic season of a classic television series. My wife April and I do. We have one coming up where we talk about a terrible movie and a bad trip to the movies with the Cardins, which is a lot of fun. Mark, you've done your Canadians Corner. I know you got some other stuff in the mix. Todd's got his Fansplain show. So it's a lot of fun. If you visit patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite, you're able to actually sample our wares for a full week for free. And then hopefully stay on and enjoy what we have to offer. But in the meantime, we'd love to give some love and respect to Jamie Prinky on the Best Buds level of our Patreon support. Over on the BFS level, Sean Sella and Henry Nias, the wonderful Nias family, been with us since the start. My dear friend and co-contributor, Missy Merchant, and her great pal, Andy Milliken. We are very happy to have you on board and to giving us support. Again, patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. Elect for any level and do a free trial. You'll be able to check out our content, and we're pretty excited about that. Also, you can find us over on YouTube, Secret Friends Unite. Subscribe, see Mark and I talking here, see my Trek friends over on Code 47, see Todd and I talking on Secret Friends Unite on a weekly basis. Like, share, and subscribe. Spread the word, because that helps us with our visibility. So that's the end of my advertising content. Mark, back to you to do some more.
All right, yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, definitely follow us in all those places, and we appreciate the support. It's fantastic. Let's get right into it. I know bits and pieces. I remember kind of the vague story, but I'd love kind of a refresher. Charlie, how did you get into Star Wars?
That's an easy one. I'm a bicentennial baby. I was born in 1976, early in 1976. Star Wars dropped Memorial Day weekend, 1977. Okay, so I was too young to go to the movies, really. And the action figure line of Star Wars, very famously, the story goes back, if you research, the early bird releases and things like that, was not available on a retail source from Kenner until really actually till Christmas of 1978. And they sold little early bird certificates. My wife has a story that her brother, who is a few years older than us, my wife and I are the same age, that my in-laws did purchase those for him, and at the end of it, he had a near full set on that cool standee. And actually, when April and I were on our way back from Las Vegas, we stopped at Kokomo Toys in Kokomo, Indiana, one of the most famous toy stores in the nation. And they have a complete set of the early bird action figures on that standee for like $1,200. Obviously, I'm not a vintage toy collector, so that was of no interest to me. But it's really cool to see it. Not that it was in the greatest shape, but it was really cool to see it in the flesh. So anyway, again, by the time I hit about 4 years old, we're at Memorial Day of 1980. The Empire Strikes Back is coming out. Clearly, and again, I'm 4 years old, so how hazy is your memory when you're that old, right? You can't necessarily, especially at my age, I'm almost 50 years old. What do you remember, right? But I do very clearly remember that my dad, we all lived back in the Metro Detroit area at that time before I moved to West Michigan when I was 8 or 9 years old. I was 4 at the time. My dad took my brother and I to the theater. I'm assuming it's probably the theater at Eastland Mall in Harper Woods on the east side of the Metro Detroit, which is where I grew up. And back in those days, there was no, pre-flicks or Maria Menounos talking about movies and stuff. There was simply looking at the screen, an out of focus white picket fence. That was what you had before any kind of trailers or anything aired. I don't even know if any trailers aired, because honestly, I have 2 memories of that occasion, which again, this was Memorial Day or probably the summer of 1980. So I was 4.5 years old. I remember the out of focus white picket fence. And I then remember to keep time, my brother and my dad and myself played rock, paper, scissors to pass the time. Literally, that's where my memory of the event stopped. I don't know anything about the movie. The first thing that I remember about the film, which Empire Strikes Back, as I've said, definitely my favorite Star Wars film, takes place probably 5 years later, 4.5, 5 years later, when my mom, again, my parents split up when I was young. So my mom and my brother and I moved over to West Michigan. I live in Grand Rapids, so that's the area that I'm in now. My mom had a friend who was an early bootlegger with VHS tapes, had a bootleg copy of The Empire Strikes Back. However, the first probably 15, 20 minutes of it were like scrambled, like porn on the place, like on the Playboy station. So it was fuzzy. And because I watched his tape so many times, I could tell you at the exact moment when the fuzziness came back into focus. It was literally on the Superstar Destroyer. Vader is standing there with, his admirals, with his senior naval officers, and one of them, is saying blah blah blah, something about this probe in the Haas system. The picture comes back in, and Vader says, "That's there. That is the system." And from there, I get to see the rest of the movie. So that first, like I said, I'd have to check the time codes, but the first 15 to 20 minutes of Luke, the Wampa, him being rescued by Han, being in the Bacta tank, the super awkward kiss between Luke and Leia, all just and then we get to the rebels are there, and then the movie's clear. But again, we're talking about the very earliest of VHS bootleg tapes of people taping stuff, and like, I saw this on TV, or a buddy of mine owned the VHS cassette, which at that time were $100 American if you wanted to buy a VHS tape. It was completely insane. And Mark, if I'm not mistaken, this was right around the time you were born, because you were born in 84, 86, 83? 84. There you go. Just a baby. But yeah, no, that's what, and I know that, I know, and you'll segue into your experience, but that was my experience there. So that was, 1980, between 1980 and 1985, I grew up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. Again, it's a suburb of Metro Detroit. I went to Mayer Elementary School. Very clearly remember that in the middle of a weekday of the school week, my mother, God bless her heart, 1983, pulled my brother and I out of school, probably on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, to go see The Empire Strikes Back. And you always have that one little friend who's a snitch who's like, I'm telling you that your mom pulled you out of school to see Star Wars, blah, blah, blah. Hey, you know what? Suck it, kid. I can almost remember that kid's name was Chris. Can't remember his last name. We were friends, but he was kind of a jackass, because I think he tried to snitch on me. But you know what? Doesn't matter. It's Star Wars, baby. There's no rules. So I would compare contrast that experience. And again, same vicinity. I grew up in a very tiny little codicil of a community. Grew up on a street called Lorraine. Lorraine dead ended into a street that had Mayer Elementary, which was my school. On the other side of it was a shopping district called The Village in Grosse Pointe, which had a drugstore called the Notre Dame Pharmacy, which sold comic books, for in which I picked up my very first Marvel comic. This was long before my lifelong love affair with comic book characters, which you can clearly see behind me. I picked up Star Wars Marvel Comics Volume 1, issue 65, Galroth Never Forgets. I have a framed copy of it upstairs in my house, and that was the beginning of my love of comic books. That plus Indiana Jones, which I started with number 1. My other great love you can see behind me. So I would say, in essence, to pare it down, Star Wars, without a doubt. Now, again, we're leading my up to 1985. I was 9 years old. Without a doubt, shaped my love of fandom and shaped my childhood, kind of within those parameters.
What was the moment you knew you were a fan? You've had all these, you remember the picket fence when you were tiny, so you were exposed. But what was the time when you said, when you realized that you could get a Star Wars tattoo and not regret it? When was the time that
Because I do.
you thought, I'm going to be inching closer to 50 and still wanting to talk about Star Wars? What was that moment for you? Or is it one specific moment, or is it just this amalgamation of all of these little bits of stories?
You put together those things, the blurry VHS copy, the seeing, Empire for the first time and having a focus. But I think if you were to pare it down to something where kind of worlds collide, I'm a lifelong comic book guy that started in 1982 when I picked up Star Wars 65 there at the Notre Dame Pharmacy. I hasten to say that would probably be the moment that both Star Wars and then reading comics, beyond just reading, back in the old days, we had the Sunday newspaper with the big, comic book, comic strip section, which I read because, the Detroit Free Press, my mom there are 2 newspapers in Detroit. There was the News and the Free Press. My mom loved the Free Press. So that's we got to the house. And that had the comic section. You had, Peanuts and later on Calvin and Hobbes and all that kind of different stuff. But for me, picking up that first comic and then also, Indiana Jones, which is part and parcel to Star Wars because of kind of some shared, creative brain trust that put it all together. 1982, 1983 cemented my fandom in being able to kind of always having Star Wars in my DNA. Because again, though I was born before Star Wars, it was a national phenomenon. You got to remember, this is a film that when it came out, George Lucas himself didn't think it would amount to anything. He was so terrified that when it came out, he and his best buddy, Steven Spielberg, flew to Hawaii, spent the week in Hawaii, where they actually broke the story for Raiders of the Lost Ark, famous, great story, because they were terrified to see box office receipts or any kind of reception to Star Wars. And again, if you looking at photographs of LA at the time, the Grauman's Chinese Theater, lines were around the block, and it was a phenomenon that stayed in the theater for probably 2 years because there was no home video market. That was the only people were like, "Hey, Mark, what are you doing on Saturday night? Let's go see Star Wars for the 48th time. Why not? It costs 25 cents. Let's go to the movies." You know what I mean? So it was no different than like, "Hey, Mark, let's watch, Star Wars on Disney Plus." Boop,
Right.
put it on. It was kind of the same thing. So from that point, obviously at some juncture in and around 1980, it was laden into the culture of young boys in our time. And again, I embraced it in a way that, that it was my way to always feel a way to stay young, feel a way to stay vital. So, hey, it's better than, having a midlife crisis and buying a sports car. You know what I mean? We do this. I collect action figures, and I enjoy it. And again, my rule with action figures, I don't know if I've mentioned it on other shows. Anytime I buy a figure, whether it be in person, I order something online, I get it in my hands, I bring it home, and I hand it to my wife, April, to open. So, so that she always knows what I've got. And if she's never asked, but I will, therefore tell her what I paid for it. But that way, everything kind of that you see here, is equalized in that fashion.
Fair. That's good. For me, I'm gonna go same question. So that's how we're gonna basically do this, I guess, is one for one. We'll just go through the
Yeah.
questions that we usually ask our guests and answer them ourselves. So my my getting into Star Wars, like I said, born the tail end of '84, so missed the first theatrical runs of all the movies. But at that point, Star Wars was everywhere. So like early memories before I ever saw the films, and I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old before I saw any of the movies in any real fashion. But I remember like summers we'd go, to my grandparents' place, and like they'd have, spare toothbrushes or something that we could have there or whatever. And it was always like they just went out and they bought like Star Wars toothbrushes for us. So they'd have little
Right, because they're in
Star
the
Wars
stores.
things, right? Like it was just always
Yeah.
like, so I like
Yeah.
it was always just something I knew. There was always Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker. I knew these names from the time, like a time before I knew names. You know what I mean? Like it was just like they were some of the first characters that I remember knowing existed. And you hear the catchphrases of, Luke, I am your father, which doesn't actually exist, but was kind of like
Misquote.
that was
Yes.
the misquoted thing that was just everywhere and parodied on every single cartoon from, whatever, The Simpsons, Bugs Bunny, whatever it was, anything you watched, it was just there, right?
Yeah.
But I really got into Star Wars with VHS copies that my aunt owned. And I'd go over my grandparents' place, and she still lived with them at the time. And I remember, we'd go into her room because she had some of the action figures and stuff like that. But in this little glass kind of bookshelf, she had, or cabinet or whatever, she had the copies of the VHS and a few books and whatever else. She and Star Trek stuff. You'd like my aunt, man. She was
Oh yeah.
she was
Hey, if I
Star
ever
Trek, Star Wars.
make my way up to CBI, yeah, you make that introduction. I'm down with that.
Absolutely. She makes some mean salsa too. I got to get some more of her salsa.
I'm
really
into
good
it.
stuff.
I like it.
We were just talking about that. My brother and I were talking about that earlier. Which just all coming together. But anyway, she had these. So I always remember like asking, what are these? It's like, you're not really old enough. You're not really old. And then one weekend or one day, I remember she said, okay, yeah, you know what? You can borrow one. You're going to borrow this first one. And at that point, we got together. I think I was in like Beavers or Cubs or something like that. And she was one of the leaders. So it was like a weekly thing. I got to see her and hang out for a bit.
Yeah.
And, so that's the age that I was in. So whatever that is, 6, 8, 10, I can't remember. It's all kind of hazy exactly
you're
what
talking
happened.
about
but like
the equivalent, like in the US of like Cub Scouts or something like that.
yeah, that's it. Was like the pre Cub Scouts was like Beavers. It was called. It was the younger version of it. Anyway, so that was. I remember being in that, and she was like, "You know what? Yeah, you can watch this first one. You have it for a week. You'll get the next one next week when I see you. So go home and watch this." And that was it. It was just a VHS copy that I watched and was just like, holy crap, I've never seen anything like this. I've seen Disney movies at this point.
Sure.
But not much else, So you go from like Aladdin and The Little Mermaid, which were great, to this was just like,
those,
come on.
So you're saying you were 10, so we're talking about like 1995, 1994, 1995.
Yeah.
So that was,
earlier.
If I'm remembering my marketing correctly, there was a big re-release of those VHS tapes in the mid to early 90s, because I remember it was those tapes that, unless you had the originals, they had kind of that, there was a new art style to it. It was like one of them had Yoda's face and one of them was Vader's face. It was that one, or not that one?
No, it was okay. So I'll put this in a timeline. It was maybe a year before that came out that I watched them, because those were the copies that I got because I loved them so much. And it wasn't long after I kept wanting to borrow her set. And then those special editions came out with Yoda's face, Darth Vader's face, and a stormtrooper. I think they
Yeah,
were
and
free.
again, that's not the special editions of the film per se,
No,
because
no, no, that
that
was
came
like,
later. But
yeah,
it was a re-release of
VHS
the
re-release.
VHS tapes. But yeah, the '80s ones were probably akin to what I was describing to you, the dub that my mom's friend
Hmm.
Sean, she was a work friend of hers, had done for us. That was the bootleg. Like, he had a buddy who had that tape, and then he copied it, and it was a mess, or he did it off TV or something. It could have been off of
Yeah,
TV, because again, it was in the early '80s that those films finally found their way onto television.
yeah,
So that could have been it as well.
yeah. So I don't know what copies she owned, but I definitely, so I can really place, like, if someone knows exactly when that version came out, that is when. So I think the version you're thinking of is 95. So I definitely
Yeah,
would
yeah.
have watched these when I was about 9 or 10,
Okay.
because it wasn't that long before I got my own copy, and that was like,
Yeah.
holy crap, that's amazing. Um, I'm just trying to read these. So that, yeah, that was 95. They featured large images of Darth Vader and
Yeah, yeah.
Stormtrooper and Yoda. So that was
There you
95.
go.
So
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
perfect
And I had
timeline. So I'm 8 or 9
Yeah,
when I watched
and I
these.
had those sets as well. I was probably in high school, and my mom picked us up again, probably to replace the original set that we had worn out. Because again, you watch them, 50,000 times, and that's what's funny. I think about my wife and my stepdaughter. This was obviously long before I knew her. She was born in 1994. Toy
Mhm.
Story came out in 1995, and my wife very famously tells the story that, hey, I had to buy Toy Story like 2 or 3 times because Victoria, who's my daughter's name, wore the cassette out watching it. I mean, it would be like with your son now, if the stuff like Bluey, if he had to watch Bluey over and over again and it wasn't on cassette, you'd be going out and buying them every like couple of months,
Oh,
instead of the fact
absolutely.
that now we live in a streaming world. So it's you push a button and it's on, and eventually your Roku dies, you got to go out and buy another one. That's as much as you have to pay.
We have burnt out an Apple TV since Finn was born.
Yeah,
Um,
I've gone through a lot
that's
of Rokus. They're not
yeah,
super reliable, and I have one that I because I travel for work. I have one that I take with me so I can watch stuff in the hotel. But yeah. So we
yeah.
probably own a couple of them. But yeah, it's much cheaper than going out and buying VHS tapes to buy a new Roku that costs $25. No big deal.
Yeah. So that was my introduction to Star Wars, is watching these week by week and the torture of having to wait a week. And I know someone that would have watched someone a little bit older than you that would have watched them in the theaters. It's like you're talking a week, and then waiting for the prequels and then the sequels. I know we, like, Star Wars fans, we're used to
Yeah.
waiting, but for me at that age of 8 or 9 or whatever, that was like torture, because I remember, like, what happened? What do they rescue? Especially the gap between Empire and Return of the Jedi,
Oh,
because
right,
there's
because
so much.
it was an actual, though it was not a true cliffhanger. It left obviously plot elements. They're like, what's going on? It wasn't like, for example, the season finale of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which just happened. It was a very clear cliffhanger because at the end of it, the crew was in danger. They were under attack. And you're like, are they going to survive?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it was like at the end of Empire, it was like, yeah, everybody got to safety, but we had to leave a comrade behind, and now we got to go off and rescue him. And what's that? Luke has lingering issues about, is Vader really my father? Was he just punking me
Mhm.
out? So yeah, you had to digest this over those 3 years. Although you did have the original run of the Marvel comics kind of running in between and
Mhm.
teasing it with little plot points here and there. Ultimately, rendered non-canonical by the Disney absorption, and they relaunched in January 2015. They relaunched their comic series, which is considered canonical. But again, I started about midway through that 107 issue run and read it backwards and forwards, and there were, much like a lot of the EU, some of it is great and some of it is trash. But there are elements of those issues that, again, I'm like, I love this story, like, this great underwater story that they had, or the Droid World story that they had, which was transitioned into a book on tape that I had at one point that was just excellent. And it's funny because some of that stuff finds its way back into canon. The Droid
Yeah.
World, and I think Kligson was the name of the main droid in that, found its way back into canon with Andor or Obi-Wan or something. It came back into canon recently. I'd have to look into that. Kligson was the name of the droid. It was
Cool.
really weird.
That I just posted. a story on Instagram, or like reshared a story to my stories on Instagram of Dave Filoni
Yeah.
speaking about
Yeah.
how, George always only considered really the movies and like the newer shows like Clone Wars and that kind of stuff canon,
Right.
and
Yeah.
everything else was like cool what if stories.
Right. Star Trek is
So
very much the same. You had a legacy of what's now going on 60 years of visual entertainment. So you have, novels and
mhm,
comics and things like that. That again, we live in a time entertainment wise of the multiverse. Like, hey, there are What If and Marvel and Loki and all this different stuff that has different permutations and stuff. So yeah, things can live in your head canon, but the beauty of Star Wars and Filoniverse and kind of like with Star Trek with Lower Decks, I know Mark, you've sampled it, is that they'll reach back to the animated Star Trek series and they'll pluck out something that they think is kind of fun or satirical
yeah,
and stick it in that show. It's like, now
yeah,
this is canon. Now this is
yeah,
canon.
and that's exactly what he was talking about, was loving being able to go back and like, he doesn't need to rewrite the book all the time if there's something that fans are really passionate about, but he
Yeah.
also he also knows that sometimes you just have to do your own thing and write your own story and forget what the expanded. You can take bits and pieces, but you don't have to retell those stories exactly beat by beat. So I can't wait to see what he's doing with Thrawn and adapting the Thrawn trilogy and taking from
Totally.
the
Yeah.
original EU stuff and then the newer Thrawn stuff that is considered canon and all that, like mixing it all up for this new movie or show or whatever's going to eventually happen with the Mandoverse.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's kind of, yeah, my intro to Star Wars. I eventually got through all the movies. Like I said, loved them so much. I just kept borrowing them as much as I could.
Mhm.
Eventually got my own copies, and really didn't look back. I always loved Star Wars since then. It was the prequels, the sequels, whatever I could get my eyes on, and that's why I always say like Star Wars is like, what do you mean? Like people don't like something with Star Wars? Like I don't like everything that comes out of everything, but like it's new Star Wars. It's fun.
Yeah.
I can turn my brain off and just enjoy it for what it is.
I mean,
Um,
it's the same thing with me with a lot of different entertainment. Like, for example, we had a kind of a popular opinion with Marvel recently. Secret Invasion was terrible. I didn't enjoy it. Todd didn't enjoy it. A lot of other people, they spent $200 million on something that was a dud. But you can push that off to the side and think, what, hey, Loki's coming up. That looks amazing. I'm fired up about that. Or, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was fantastic. I loved it. So you can pick and choose, but even in those things that are not considered great, there are still elements that you can pluck out. Star Trek is very much the same. Hey, I love this series, or I'm not high on the series, but they had this moment and that moment and whatever it is. It is just something to
I
enjoy.
gotta swing with a hot take right now. I enjoyed the hell out of Secret Invasion. I
Wow.
really, I really did. Like it wasn't.
Literally the first person I've heard that said that, because the vitriol over that show is broad. But
I've
I,
seen the hate online. I don't understand it. I thought it was a great character study for Nick Fury. I thought the stakes were high and real because they were just killing people off, or you didn't know who was an actual Skrull or who was going to come back or who was going to stay dead. And it seems like some of the
yeah.
main people are either dead or have been Skrulls for a little while. I don't like some of the, and this is going back to the Star Wars. I don't like every single bit. I don't like how the director of this was told not to read the comics or not to kind of pay too
Oh
much
yeah.
attention to
That
this or that,
sucks.
and made up
Yeah.
his own kind of thing about
Yeah.
like how long Rhodey was a Skrull because it takes away some of the emotional weight of some of the past stuff. He's been a Skrull for too long. So
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
prefer him being a Skrull
Yeah.
kind of after Endgame kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So there
agree.
are bits and pieces that I can pick out of the show that I didn't like, but overall, I thought it was a good ground level, high stakes, but like character study kind of show where you walked away from it with a few major players that we've gotten used to over different movies and series and whatever, taken off the table. And I literally didn't know who was going to live or die or who was who at any given point. I thought, and I thought that was entertaining for a Marvel show where usually Marvel stuff, you can be like, yeah, I kind of read this comic, I know what's going to happen, whatever.
Yeah.
But
I mean, and, it's funny because
I enjoyed it week to week.
the Age of Ultron, the Avengers film was that way. That was a completely separate miniseries that had absolutely nothing to do with what you saw in the film, but it was in name only, so it didn't really make much of a difference. So, hey, you know what? Again, I'm a believer, and again, pairing it back to Star Trek, infinite diversity, infinite combinations. Love what you love. Don't yuck somebody else's yum. If you loved Secret Wars or Secret Invasion, you're the only person who said that to me. Love it. That works for me. That works for me.
I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. It's not going to go on like my yearly, I need to watch this again. Like I'll watch Winter Soldier over and over again until my eyes bleed.
Yes.
But or like Civil War or Endgame or whatever, I could just like endlessly rewatch. But like there's certain things that like, am I feeling the Incredible Hulk today? I don't know. So like
I have, and I know we're way off Star Wars, but I have a Cap 6-pack. Cap 1, The Avengers, Winter Soldier, and then the other two, and then Civil War, and then Infinity War, and then Endgame.
Yeah.
Gives you kind of everything that you need for phase 1. If you had to cut out everything else, you can cobble it together by watching those 6 movies. End of me talking about Marvel. But yes, that's Charlie. That is Charlie's 6-pack. # Charlie 6-pack. Go ahead and watch that deal. I endorse it.
We already talked about Empire being your favorite. Any other top favorites that you have in Star Wars media? Like favorite show maybe instead of movies?
Mando in particular, season 2 was a favorite.
Yes.
They kind of lost me in season 3. It didn't really blow me away. Rebels was great for me from end to end. Rogue One was unstoppable as a film. Best thing that, in my opinion, that Disney has done since they took over the property. I won't say flawless because there's no such thing, but as close to it as they have gotten. And then, of course, I love my volume 1 of Marvel Star Wars, even as dumb as it is. I can't let go of, my childhood wrapped up in that series and, the kind of wacky things they were doing, because, again, they had no other lens by which to tell stories. They weren't going for continuity. They weren't necessarily thinking about what happens between this and that and how does it affect the overall storyline. They were just telling wild science fiction stories, and some of them were really out there. So I would encourage, those are available actually on Marvel Unlimited in the United States, not Canada. Sorry, Mark. But you can probably find some of them on Comixology Unlimited or in your local comic shop. Always shop local. That's something that we definitely believe in here at Secret Friends Unite. Go out and explore those. They exist in various trade paperbacks. They are fun, weird stories. The first 50 or 60 issues are a little iffy for me, but because they're kind of pre Empire Strikes Back, but the Empire to Jedi, and then a nice long stretch after Return of the Jedi that they tell stories probably for the last, I'm going to say 30 issues. They're telling stories post Return of the Jedi. Some of those are really kind of crazy and fun. So I would recommend them.
Cool. For me, Return of the Jedi always stands out as my favorite movie. I also love Force Awakens. Really love that one. And Revenge of the Sith, that I always I can watch that endlessly for like this the emotion, the lightsaber battle. It's just, yeah, I love going back to those ones. I also, Mando obviously is a big one for me, and I know I asked movie or show, but I also have to throw out the Jedi series, Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order, especially Survivor. Cal Kestis just kind of came into his own as a character. The game was just flawless. I think it's my game of the year this year.
Yeah.
And that's saying something when there's a Zelda game out, and it's phenomenal. Which leads me into the next question I was going to ask, is some favorite characters. So Luke, Mando, and Cal, I think, are probably top 3 for me. Gunji would be close up there, and Yoda. But
whoops.
Hello.
Yeah, I lost you a sec there, bud. You there?
Lost. I am here.
Okay, you're back. 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah. So the character that kind of leads into characters for me. So for me, Luke, Cal, Mando, definitely favorite characters. Gunji would be up there. Yoda would be up there. Obi-Wan, but like I always seem to come back to Luke and Mando, especially lately.
Mm-hmm.
In the last few years, just kind of elevated up there. But Cal, man, instantly, Cal and BD as a pair, just like
I hear you.
So close to my heart now. After spending so many hours with them in those games.
Yeah.
What about you, Han Solo? I know.
Yeah, Han. It's cosplay I love, and again, Harrison Ford. To me, and this is something my mother will deny, but I've always felt Harrison Ford was a kind of a beacon of my father, because I think they look a little bit alike. And of course, growing up, you think, "Oh, my dad is my hero." That's very common. So I thought, well, Han Solo, he's a hero. He's Indiana Jones. He's Harrison Ford, and he's Han Solo. Luke Skywalker. I was a little blonde-haired kid when I was young, so I'm like, here's a guy who looks like me. But as I continue to age, Obi-Wan is a character, not necessarily Alec Guinness, who's apparently not a great guy in real life. In his later life, to Star Wars fans, he was apparently actually quite cruel to making little kids cry, who said, "Can I have your autograph?" Making kids cry. That's a pretty famous story about him. But looking at Ewan McGregor, who I actually just watched Ewan McGregor in Doctor Sleep, which was the sequel to The Shining, just over the weekend. Really great performance. He's a wonderful actor, but watching his portrayal of Obi-Wan from 1999, which would be episode 1, I consider that to be somewhat of a bright spot of that film, though Liam Neeson was obviously really great in it as well. Watching him evolve through that prequel trilogy, again, I found him to be a bright spot. But I found Obi-Wan itself, and again, while I found or Kenobi, the limited series on Disney Plus, within the past year, while I found some elements of it to be problematic, you're messing with canon, that's not really the time frame. I found his portrayal of that once mighty, quick-witted, shit-eating grin kind of Jedi into a beaten down, hey, I'm working in a cannery and life sucks and this is all I got. His portrayal of that character after 10 years of just being like, oh this is all I got going for me and there's nothing is ever going to be better, but I got to keep living, I got to keep fighting. And then for him to say, hey, you know what, I got to rise back up again. The galaxy needs me. My friends need me. My extended family needs me. Watching him rise up again, that's the thing I love the most about that series and about that character. So I feel like of any character in Star Wars, and again, you could say, well, Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader had a greater arc of redemption, whatever it is. But I feel like I liked watching Obi-Wan, feeling he was more like us, like, hey, I'm high and now I'm low, and what do I do to get back up again? And him finding his way throughout that series, I found that to be compelling. I really did enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that series. For sure. Yeah, it was. I love, like I said, any kind of, and the same kind of reason I like the Nick Fury in Secret Invasion. Right? It's that you think you're too old for this shit, or you think you're beaten down, or you think whatever, and it's just like, no, you know what? I still got something left. I can do this.
Yeah.
I like that kind of parallel. Light side or dark side, Charlie? If you woke up with force powers.
I've always considered myself to be an agent of good, and again, in my life, people who know me know that I've certainly been through a lot of struggles, a lot of tough times, but I have always pushed forward with optimism and with hope for a better future. It's probably why I love Star Trek as much as I do, because it speaks to the goodwill of humanity. The light side of the force speaks to the goodwill throughout adversity. So I am a light side guy.
Ditto for sure. Always optimistic, to probably an annoying extent, if you ask my wife sometimes. Lightsaber color of choice. I actually don't know this one of you.
I never really give it that much thought. I do. The only lightsaber that I own is your hero saber, you basically your Anakin, Luke, Rey blue saber. But it's funny because I'm looking, while I have my desk flipped around, I have the 3 classic trilogy posters in front of me. And the only one that has a lightsaber ignited by Luke is the Return of the Jedi poster, and it's blue, which it's not. Obviously, it was an early piece of artwork. So I loved his green saber. I'm an Irishman. We love green. It's our thing. So I can't really decide between the two. But again, they're very classic. They're very virtuous representations of the good that Jedi do. So I would probably end up choosing a green if I was to purchase another saber off the rack. I'd probably grab that Return of the Jedi Luke saber if I was to grab one, because I like that color green. It ain't easy being green, but he found a way to do it.
Fair, yeah, and I think I've told this story on the show a few times, I think, but I'll recap it in case no one's or someone listening that hasn't heard it. When I was in Galaxy's Edge building my own saber, I thought for weeks, months, as soon as I found out I was going to build my own saber, I was racking my brain. I've always loved Luke's green saber, but to build my own, what color was I going to pick? And I knew it wasn't going to be red, so it was down between purple, blue, and green. And really, it was between blue and green. They were the two that I kind of narrowed it down to, and the two that I kind of really felt like that drawn to for different reasons. And I ended up, they ask you to close your eyes, and they ask you which color you can see. And I swore up and down that there was a green light shining somewhere. My wife was behind me, not building a saber, and she said, no, it was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face, let alone a green light shining somewhere. So don't know what that was. So I grabbed a green crystal as soon as it was presented to me, because I saw the color green very, very vividly and very clearly. But the Force had a different idea for me, because my lightsaber build was not a perfect build. The first, the inner hilt where you actually put the lightsaber, the battery was dead or something went wrong with it, so nothing worked at first when I was building. Then there was some trouble fitting the emitter cap onto my lightsaber, so when I took it out and ignited it for the first time, the emitter cap actually wasn't on, so I didn't have a fully built lightsaber. So the Disney cast member, came up afterwards and said, hey, I know that wasn't a great experience and you paid a lot of money for it. Here, pick any other crystal that you want. And I got my blue crystal. So I have my green and blue that the Force just made sure I owned.
Say what you want about Disney, but that is, and again, I've not been to Disney parks since I was 15, so it was long before anything that you experienced. But they are renowned for their commitment to customer experience. It's staggering. It's a model by which any other model can be based upon, is my understanding. So say what you want about Disney, but that is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. That's a great story.
Yeah. Another Disney story revolving around Star Wars. So we went there for our honeymoon, and this was before Galaxy's Edge was built. This was a few years prior to that. And we were just going through the Star Tours, right? They had the single ride, and they had a few props and this and that. Through the queue, for extra long queues, when it's really busy in the summertime or whatever, you'd go through this long kind of hallway stretch where there's posters and original artwork and all this kind of stuff from like the old original releases. So probably the poster with a miscolored lightsaber and early concept art of like the droids and this and that and whatever. The bad thing is, if you go in September, middle of September, when it's not busy, the lineup queues are shortened. So you don't get to see all that.
Yeah. Oh,
but
boy.
Me being a big fan was like peering over, and people are like passing us in the line, and I'm like peering over to try to get, and the guy that was just kind of like standing watching the line or whatever was like, do you want to go in there? And it was like, I had this museum of concept art and posters to myself as long as I wanted, to wander through these hallways of this like queue/museum exhibit of all this Star Wars memorabilia and stuff. And the guy just opened the gate, like the velvet
rope. Just letting you into the VIP. So it was a champagne room. Just
here you go, bud. When you're ready to come out, get my attention. I'll come over and let you out, and you can jump back in the lineup and go enjoy your ride. And I just like,
that is exceptional.
Phenomenal. phenomenal.
That's it.
And I wish at that point that I knew, because there are some things where you can like say thank you to this cast member or call certain people out, and I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
And I wish I did, because I would have got that guy's name and like praised him and thanked him. But
Yeah.
if you know who was working that in 2016, that Star Wars line in the middle of September, thank you.
If
Give him a thumbs
if
up.
you're out there, we salute you without a
Awesome
doubt. That's
stuff. Yeah.
awesome.
Do you have a favorite? I know you're not a big lightsaber guy, but do you have a favorite like lightsaber design? Is it that Hero Saber or Luke's?
Man,
Or?
I just don't, because you're right, I don't focus on it quite the way that you and a lot of our other guests have. But yeah, I have that hero design. I and I really do. It's the classic. It's the enduring style that goes throughout. So yeah, I've never really explored. We're going to be in Orlando next February. I don't know if we're going to make it down to Galaxy Edge. We have a pretty packed itinerary because we're turning around getting on the Star Trek cruise, which ports out of there. Right. So I'm hopeful, but I'm not sure, because we have a wedding in Vegas for my best friend from high school the same weekend. So we're going from Grand Rapids to Vegas to Orlando on a boat and then back again. So I don't know the Galaxy's Edge is going to end up being a part of it. So someday, yeah. You can only you only have much. So I'm very fond these days of saying you only have so much bandwidth for so much stuff, and I might not have enough bandwidth for Galaxy's Edge in that moment. So, the Hero Saber does it for me. I've not, it's in my closet in its box. I've not really suited up in Star Wars in quite some time. I'd love an occasion to do it. Mark, you ever find your way to the USA? I could hook you up with some friends that we could have, and I've got photographer friends who could do a great photo shoot anywhere. Name the time. We can make it happen.
Sounds fun. We remember my wife's cousin opened an arcade in Washington, I want to say. I think Washington State. It's way over the West Coast. But so we were saying that it'd be fun to go visit them and maybe kind of drive down and see some of the national parks on the West Coast and all that kind of stuff.
Oh God, yes.
She wasn't sure where you and Todd lived, so she was like, "Is that any close to where those two live?" And I was like,
not at all, but
even remotely.
We would find that is out where John lives. With John, our other best, that would be an occasion to go out that way. I've always wanted. I haven't been to Seattle in many, many years, but they have one of the biggest, one of the kind of big, the Monster 5 Comic Cons. Emerald City is out in Seattle, and the big five being New York, Dragon Con. Now I'm drawing a blank, San Diego, obviously, but yeah, one of the Monster Cons is out there in Emerald City. So I would love to plan something like that. That would be incredible. And Washington State is unparalleled in its beauty. It's probably very much like Vancouver, BC, because it's the same stretch of land.
Yeah, right next to, and that's where the arcade. I was like, they are so close to Vancouver or BC or whatever. So we are mapping that out. I don't know if it's gonna happen or anytime soon or whatever.
You let us know. April and I, especially since we're empty nesters, we're very avid in our travels, and so we're happy to hop on a plane and go someplace. So you just let us know. Sweet. We're down.
I think we kind of know. Like, I'd choose to hang out with either the Jedi or space pirates. I think you'd go Rebels if you could hang out with the group.
Yeah, I'm really down with the X-Wing Squadron. The OC that I created as a cosplay character is a colonel in the Rebel Alliance, and he's a flyer, runs a squadron, and then subsequently, after the fall of the Empire, he joins the New Republic as the Secretary of Defense. So it's just very, very high level dude. But again, I wrote a whole backstory for him. Much like Biggs Darklighter, he started out young, idealistic, joined the Imperial Navy, figured out what they did, and then jumped ship. But was a very high level dude. So yeah, I love that. I've never really completed my X-Wing jumper because I never really got a jumpsuit that fits. But I have the helmet. I have some of the bits and bobs, like the chest pack and the hose and stuff. I've just never really gotten back to it. What's tough is that because I'm not really part of the cosplay community outside of the Star Trek stuff that we do for charity and for the Grand Petoskey. So I just don't have an occasion to really do Star Wars cosplay anymore, which is unfortunate, but I would love an opportunity. Just love an opportunity to suit back up or find a reason to squeeze back into that. So we'll see.
Sure. So the last thing I want to ask you is, do you have a favorite Star Wars collectible item, something that in your collection that's like, is it the framed comic?
It's tough. and that's probably it, because again, I don't have a lot of the toys because I had them, probably gave them to my son, my oldest son, when he was of age, because he dug it, and then they just kind of got scattered to the mist. My mom saved a lot of that stuff, and it's funny,
Mm.
I live in the house I grew up in. The room that I have built my studio in was the playroom, for lack of a better expression. When I was a kid, we moved in this house when I was 9 years old. When I would bring my son here when he was young, this was still the play area. My other son, when he was born, also bring him here. So the toys just kind of dissipated over time. But yeah, without a doubt, that nice framed, I don't know how crisp it is, copy of Star Wars 65, Galrath Never Forgets, is upstairs on the second floor of my house, right outside the bathroom. It's on the wall, and right below it is a copy of Indiana Jones, The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones, issue number 1, written and drawn by John Byrne, who is my favorite comic book creator, so will always be very precious to me.
Nice. Mine, I already talked about it. It's the lightsaber that I built. I think would be my top choice. I love. I didn't answer the favorite lightsaber design, but I love Gunji's wooden lightsaber and Tenelka from Legends. I always loved her Rancor tooth design. I always thought that was like the most badass thing I ever heard. So incorporating both wood and a Rancor tooth into my own lightsaber was just like that was like tops for me. That was amazing. The other thing I wanted to do tonight, after these questions, I put it out to our Discord group. I asked some like hot takes if anyone wanted our opinions on anything in Star Wars. So we got a couple. We got the first one is from our old buddy Todd.
Oh yes.
This is the worst character in Star Wars, and he said we couldn't pick Jar Jar. Do you have a worst character?
First of all, as Todd knows, nobody tells me what to do. I'll pick Jar Jar if I want to, but for the sake of diplomacy, if I was to go beyond that, jeez, I mean, Palpatine was pure evil, completely driven.
Oh, worst that way. Okay.
Yeah, worst as far as the most villainous. I guess I would look at it through that lens, because he was the complete id of greed, of racism, of xenophobia, and of everything that he did was calculated towards his aims. He was a very complete mustache twirling villain, in so much as his focus, but again, the layers by which you watch the prequel trilogy from stem to stern. He saw that he played the very long 13-year long game of like, well, I'll set up this thing with the Naboo, and by leveraging that'll get me into power, and then in the 10 years in between, I'll manipulate this Jedi master to working with these cloners to make an army, and then I'll manufacture a reason that this army has to be used, and then I'll make these two armies fight, but I'll make the Senate acknowledge that it's necessary to engage an army to fight them, and then I control this army, but I've also programmed them that when I'm ready, I can flip a switch and they can wipe out my enemies, and then I'll be completely in power. Holy shit. That's incredible. That is incredible. So yeah, I would say he's the worst as far as evil, but like a dumb character.
I think that's what Todd was getting at. It was more of like a dumb character. So
maybe Jackson the Rabbit, which I have a figure. He's over on my figure shelf of the my bounty hunter characters, my ne'er-do-wells. He's over there. But he wasn't really enduring. God, I have to look over these shelves. There was a time I collected a lot of these characters, and I'm just looking over trying to see one that is just like, oh God, why did they bother with this one? No, that's the one I come up with. He was really dumb. I wasn't fond of the Dayglow biker kids in in Book of Boba Fett.
No,
but I know a lot of people loved him. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Jackson the Rabbit. But he was dumb, but he was also different. But he didn't really contribute anything, even though you saw him in that Marvel comic, which was negated as non-canon. But he came back in the and the short stories
Right.
from episodes 4 and episode 5. I can't remember which story he was in, but I definitely
Mm.
read it. I think I listened to the audiobook. It might have been from episode 5, because he was on Cloud City, involved with the things peripheral to Lando, and then when the Empire showed up and kind
Right.
of getting into the third act of that film, if I'm
Right.
remembering correctly. So yeah,
Okay.
kind of a lousy scoundrel of a character.
Right. I was like super tempted right away to say someone like Cad Bane to just piss a whole bunch of people off. And I don't like, I don't think Cad Bane is a terrible character. I think I'm happy with how Cad Bane, like people are like, he's not dead. I want him to come back. And I'm like, screw it. Kill him.
Looks dead to me.
Cause I just, yeah, I just like, I've seen enough. That's fine. But I'm not going to say he's one of like the worst characters ever. I am going to say, I think like, who when they added the music scene to Jedi, like what
Oh,
is it,
you're
Cy
talking about
Snoodles and
it was oh
the
god, who was the it
singing
was
and
the
whatever.
oh god, he had a name of dun 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 dun.
Yeah,
Oh my
right.
god, that's one for Google. Yeah, unnecessary ads. Yeah, if you look at the
right.
special editions as a whole, maybe not a person, but I would say the worst ad to that in
Mm-hmm.
episode 4 is the run up to Mos Eisley, and it was much worse in 97 as opposed to the digital releases we got in 04. And then I think again they may have released it later on, but it was in 04 that they digitized it and tried to shake it down. But boy, back in 97 when they cranked that out, it was the most video game looking bullshit that you can imagine. It was gross. It was really
Yeah.
really and pointless. You didn't need anything
Yeah.
more than like, okay, they're driving into the town and then they get to the cantina. It was basically digital whacking off for George, and it was
And
poor. It was
any
in
of
poor
that
form.
stuff, whatever. I just the song in Return of the Jedi when they're in Jabba's palace and all this action is about to take place, and then they just break for like 3 minutes of a song in a made up language. And then he finally pulls a thing and the chick falls down in the Rancor pit. And it's like, gee, you could have got to that way sooner like you used to.
Well, yeah, like
That,
there was absolutely nothing
yeah,
upon that
didn't,
scene that was
yeah.
like, oh man, you know what, this shit needed a musical number with a ridiculous bunch of CGI characters, and yeah, it's just George.
Take that and then you stick Zero the Hutt, I think, on top of that,
Oh,
and I think you
oh,
have my
yeah.
least favorite characters in Star
Oh
Wars.
yeah. Oh
Is
yeah.
what
No, you
I'm gonna
nailed
go
it. I
with.
wasn't even thinking about that. Zero the
Yeah,
Hut, your Truman Capote of the Huts. It's not happening.
that's it. So the next and the last question that we have: weirdest thing in Star Wars you want more of? I'm not sure if I have one of for this.
I just don't think so. No, I can't think of something.
Okay, so I will say like weird as far as like when I first watched Star Wars, I didn't expect it to go like this, but I liked it. So weird, I'm going to say The World Between Worlds, which it looks like we're going to see again in live action for this time with Ahsoka. There's a couple of things
Yeah.
in the trailer that you're like, is
Yeah.
that what I think it is? Or the stuff with like the force family, the brother, sister, father, sides of the
Yeah,
force,
from Clone
Ahsoka,
Wars. Yeah.
that
Yeah, yeah.
stuff. When Star Wars went real weird and really, gods personified and all this kind of stuff. Because watching Star Wars, if you watch the original trilogy, it's like a very grounded, very realistic. I know there's the
Yeah,
force and
so to
there's this
speak,
and
yeah.
that, but like the force is just kind of like, hey, it's a force. Everyone, it's kind of flows through everything and you can move some shit with it. Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it is mystical and magical. And there's that bit of like, that kind of is what separated it from like Star Trek and this and that was kind of more grounded in realism. But it was still kind of like the technology was like kind of gritty and weird looking and very used looking. It wasn't all shiny and everything else. So there wasn't, for me anyway, watching the originals or watching most of the movies, like there wasn't that like mysticism. And I know we eventually even saw Force ghosts, but I never really thought about like the gods of this world, or like, a multiversal world between worlds and time travel and this and that. And I guess like it makes sense, it works, but like not something I would have thought of watching the original trilogy way back when. But it's weird and I love it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that kind of counts into this question, the weirdest thing in Star Wars, because it is weird, man. But I love it. I dig it. I want to see more.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I'm always looking to push the envelope, because again, in storytelling, and again, it falls back to not only the massive complainers of in the Star Wars fandom, Star Trek as well. Like, I hate this new thing. This new thing is, it's challenging my this and that, or it's too woke, or blah. And in Star Trek, that's particularly hilarious because Star Trek has been woke since 1966, having an Asian and a black woman on the bridge of their ship. What the hell do you want? But yeah, to say, oh, well, I'm challenging my perceptions because, oh, now the hero is a woman with fantastical powers. Oh my God. I'm always interested to see them push the boundaries in a way that is not pushing the boundaries for pushing boundaries' sake. Give me a story, give me character development that is logical and exciting. And in a lot of ways that is weird because we live in this fan servicey kind of space where they just want to appease, some of Kenobi was great storytelling, but some of it was kind of fan servicey. It's like, okay, well, we gave you the story, but it's like, oh, we gave you a Vader and Obi-Wan duel, but that's really contrary to canon, but it's fan service. If you look at the expression of fan service altogether, all of this is being made for people that enjoy it, and that's the service. So where's the rub? That being said, there is still a way to go too far, when you push it too much. So So to answer your question, I don't know. But yes, I'm good with weird and I'm good with different. Just give me stories that matter, that are well told, and then characters who have a purpose, and then follow, an arc from A to B to C in a way that is meaningful. So it's the antithesis of weird. I just want storytelling. The weird is fine.
Get as weird as you want as long as it's good.
Yeah, true.
There we go.
True.
I like it. Very,
very subjective.
Fantastic, man. That's good. Well, we've been doing this for 69 episodes, and I learned some stuff about my friend Charlie tonight. So I hope everyone listening learned some stuff about us. If you have some questions, if you want to know our hot takes, ask away. Join our Discord.
Please
hit us up on social media. We'll tell you when or where in about 2 seconds. But I want to hear people's questions. We always have room for those on this show, and we can always answer them here or in the Discord or whatever and have a conversation. So with that, thank you for listening, Charlie. Tell people where they can find you.
Absolutely. Hey, folks, this has been great. Thank you for tuning in. You can find me over on Twitter or X at the C3. Just spell it out. My lovely wife, April, and I do run the USS Grand Petoskey. That is one of the biggest chapters of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Club. We are located here in West Michigan, but I do actually run Region 13, which is Michigan and Eastern Canada, which includes Mark. I got him to watch the Star Trek. I was very excited about it.
You did. We still haven't talked about that. I thought it was good.
Yes, we will do that. We'll have a little special where we just get Mark's take on Lower Decks. But anyway, if you're a Trekker within the sound of my voice, either in those spots or otherwise, find us at grandpetoskey.com. Drop us an email, and I will help connect you with Trekkers in your area. Mark, what about you?
You can find me everywhere at _Canardian. I'm not on X as much anymore, but I still check it from time to time. And you can find me mostly on Instagram, Threads, or in the Secret Friends Unite Discord group.
Discord. Awesome. Friends, one last time, thank you for joining us. I'm going to tell you that sharing is caring, and to keep on trekking.
May the force be with you. Rex, play us out.